coming and going and all around this evening. So I'm going to record the evening. And if I forget to record, remind me because I know Megan's going to leave early. Lori's going to be in and out. I think Kristen said Kristen and Lauren are running a little late. So we'll try and work around everybody's schedule here. But I want to start this evening with just kind of a little fun exercise. So I'm put in the chat a link. So what I'd like you to do is click on that link, turn off your camera, and take the gratitude quiz and come back when you've finished it. Kind of set the tone for the evening.
Hi, Dr. Spellman. Could you please drop that link again?
I think it's still in there.
I don't see it either.
Oh, hold on. You know what? I might not have put it to the whole group.
You just sent it to me.
I'm so sorry. I don't know why it was that way. Okay, let's try it again. How's that?
Got it.
Okay, thank you. We're all good? Everyone got it? Okay, and then just turn your camera on when you're finished. Don't make sure you stay and get your score. Okay, so people are popping back in. Megan, I'm trying to set up the breakout rooms, and for some reason you're not showing. I can see you here, but it's not showing me that you're here.
You want me to try to rejoin?
No, it's Megan Bradshaw.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's really strange. I'll have to figure out how to do that. I might just start over. I'll recreate. I'll do that later.
Okay.
Yeah, because you didn't appear. So we'll see. And now Edwin just came in, so we've got more people there. Okay, I think everyone's back almost. So what did you feel? How did you feel about that? What was interesting or not interesting about that little quiz? Nobody did it?
I feel like what I found most interesting was that I don't ever compare myself to those that are less fortunate and in a way feel more fortunate for myself. Like I feel like I'm reflective and grateful for I'm more so I think I focus more on being grateful for health and my family and friends, but I don't divert a lot of attention to focusing on what I've accomplished so far. So it was just interesting. The questions, I was like, ooh, I think about this a lot. I could identify a lot with this question. And then there were some questions I felt like I rarely identified with. I put maybe once a year.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's a very interesting set of questions. Anyone else have any reactions to those? Those of you that are coming in late, I'll put it in the chat again later and you can take the quiz. But we just took a gratitude quiz while we were getting organized. So, Lindsay?
Yeah, I agree with that. The one about the car accident, my initial, like, what I think about is everyone okay? Like, did someone call 911?
Right.
kind of the same thing. I don't think, oh, I'm so glad I'm safe. I My thoughts go more to, oh no, is everyone okay? Do they need help? Should I pull over? That kind of thing.
So how do you think that impacted your score as you came up with your score? Because it gave you a final score kind of out of, I think it was out of 100 and something.
105. Yeah, I think it lowered it because I said I don't frequently think about, oh, I'm so glad I'm safe, after seeing a car accident.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that. I think I hope they're safe. I'm not worried about myself at that moment.
Exactly. Exactly. Interesting. Any other thoughts or comments on it? Just I thought it would be an interesting exercise. So, and when you go into our Canvas course, let me just share my screen for a minute. So those of you that are just joining us, um, in our Canvas course, in week 7, there's a page that says gratitude, okay? And when you open it up, we have the gratitude quiz. But also, there's a really nice article underneath it that when you have time this weekend, when you're not doing lots of extra work or unpacking from moving, um, it's got a short article that just talks a lot about how it's important for school administrators, school leaders to share and have gratitude. So just thought I would share that with you. So when you're relaxing on Friday and you're overstuffed from eating too much, and being grateful, you can do that. So. Good enough. Well, I think everybody's here. So you had a lot to do in the asynchronous modules this week. You had a nice introduction before, but now a heavy introduction into Michael Fullan. And then we talked about 2 heavy virtues, social responsibility and justice, which I think are deep and have a lot of room for conversation. And then you had a pretty heavy study on equity in equitable school leadership. So some heavy topics. So I'm going to plan on going till about 6 o'clock with these. Um, if I get confused and I'm looking at 2 different clocks, remember I'm in New York, so it really is 7 o'clock here or it's 6:11 here. So if I'm going between times, just correct me. But I'm going to try and stick with the one that's on my computer that I left it on Chicago time, so I don't confuse you all completely tonight. So we'll plan on trying to stay in those rooms and work your way through. Make sure again that not everyone has to answer every question, but it is important to move through all 3 of those activities, okay? And let me see if everybody's here now, if I can try and do the groups again. Okay. Off you go.
About their digital footprint and how the digital footprint will follow them, I was like, oh my goodness, I feel like we don't emphasize that enough.
Yeah.
About how like whatever they post online right now will be there 20 years from now. And oftentimes I think as their teachers, we push that off to their computers teachers. However, in some schools there are no tech teachers, there are no computer teachers, they only have STEAM, art, and like the regular subjects, so there is no one giving them this information. And
Hmm.
so it really is up to any teacher to inform them, to be thinking before they post something on a social
Yeah.
media website or just on anything, because it will follow them. And so I thought that was like interesting to tie that to their social responsibility.
Yeah, I think that goes really well with like cyberbullying too, and then like environmental habits and just like little things that aren't necessarily in the curriculum that like you can be teaching on the side or like whenever you get a chance to fit it in.
Heather, I had for this one, I kind of asked like the question because I genuinely don't know. In the state of Illinois, are high schools or districts like requiring high school students to do like a certain amount of volunteer hours, or is that
Mm,
not something that happens here?
I don't think
It's
so.
it's
Oh,
district to district.
District to district, okay. Because I
Yeah,
think
like the
that should be a thing.
Yeah, like the Chicago public school system requires about like 40 to 50 hours for them to like have that as a graduation requirement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, but other jurisdictions don't require that. But I mean, to your point, I think I think service leadership should always be like a piece of that. Um, yeah, so I agree with all of you. I think it is something that we need to not only like model but incorporate. I think I think when it comes to like education, I think we still kind of like have some of that like traditional like frame of mind where it's like really about like developing like labor and developing people to those kinds of responsibilities. But I think if anything that we saw from like COVID, right, like it's very impossible to like succeed without some sort of like individual like group and community kind of mentality, right? So I think it becomes essential for us to really kind of start building those types of things. Because like the more like isolation like we develop amongst ourselves, like the less and less we're gonna be able to like grow as an individual. I think there's this concept in like in like an African proverb, right? Like this idea of like Ubuntu, and it's like I am
Mhm.
because I belong. And so like I always kind of think about that, right? Like when we are in a school setting, are we like competing against one another? Or are we trying all to kind of grow and develop and like, get to that like basket of like group basket together? Um, and I think like we still have some of those residual effects from before, but we should really kind of start developing like this new, especially with like things like AI and like
Yeah.
technology and like it kind of like separating us and pushing each other away. Like, I don't know, like even like with y'all, like we get to see each other like so often, but we're still at such a distance, right? So what are we really doing?
Yeah, and I think
Oh,
just to add on, I think a lot of the
Yeah,
private schools and faith-based schools do require like that type of service and that kind of thing.
leadership. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And there I'm trying to think, I'll look it up when I'm moving around, but there's an excellent book, a small book that actually one of my students recommended to me about 5 years ago, and it's called Tribes.
Mm.
I think it's Sebastian Youngst. Is that the name? It just kind of tells you and reminds you to get back to our roots, right? So yeah, somebody's in the main room that got kicked out. I've got to go get them. Okay. Hi, Kristen.
Hi, sorry. I'm having problems with my computer. I just
Okay.
got a new computer and it's like nothing but problems.
Oh
So I
no.
had to sign in under my husband's.
All right,
I'm
let me
about
just,
to.
yeah, I saw the name coming in. I'm just trying to get you. You were with Megan, Kristen, and Lindsay. Okay. You should get an invitation now.
Thank you so much.
You're good? Come here, Obi. Obi. Come here.
Even when not asked. So, like, around your community, with your colleagues, out and about. I gave an example when I was thinking about this. Like, even though I live in a neighborhood, we still have an HOA. So the HOA like sets up like clean up the playgrounds like time during the summer, like the springtime to help like because we don't hire anyone to like do landscaping. So I felt like that would be like a good social responsibility. Like you're taking care of the place that you live in without like getting any like tangible reward out of it.
No, I feel like
Mhm.
that's a very good example too for it.
Yeah, that is a
I
good
do.
example.
When I was listening to this, I also thought like this is one that I feel like not, I don't want to say necessarily goes away, but I feel like we don't always see all the
Yeah.
time, especially, within this, like, especially in an elementary school. Like, I can't remember
Hmm.
what grade you guys are in. Like some of the kids don't know that yet or have learned it, but I also feel like a lot of adults don't know it or have, forgotten about it. So I thought like that when I was listening to it, I was like, okay, do I actually see this in my everyday life and how do I see it? That's kind of what I was thinking about as we were kind of going through this too. I know it's tied back to leadership, but I started thinking about like the outside world as well.
Yeah. Well,
I
that
don't know
kind
what
of
your guys'
segues
thoughts
us
are on
into
that.
to the next one of, do you think schools need to model and or teach social responsibility?
Yes,
Yeah, I said
Yeah,
I
for
said
sure.
yes. I think
I
I know
agree.
I we had parent teacher conferences last week, and I had one parent who said, if I needed anything. And I was like, oh no, we're good if we did, She's like, well, you let me know because you're with my child more than I am. And like that's what I
Oh,
was thinking about that. I'm like, that's actually true. Like
wow.
we are with them for what, 7 hours a day roughly for
Hmm.
100 and something days. I'm
Yeah.
I
like,
mean,
this would be the easiest and part. Like we are that place to teach them other things rather than just academics.
Yeah, for sure.
and I
There,
always think about that, but it's sometimes like, sorry, I'm cutting in and out. I apologize, Carrie. Were you talking?
it's okay. No, no, no.
Sorry, like just I got like your voice at the end. I also think about that too with like I want to teach it. I think it's so important. But sometimes I struggle with the line of it because sometimes you have parents, at least I've had this happen, who have gotten upset about things that we also teach, whether it's just like a skill, like simple like saying please and thank you. And so I think, which is crazy in my mind, but I definitely have had those situations too where it's like, okay, yes, we need like this is our job. Again, we're with them all day, but you have parents that sometimes don't agree with those things. And so I do get sometimes
Mm.
nervous about teaching certain things in the classroom. I don't know if you guys have had anything like that, but it was, I mean, blew my mind. But
No,
they were
not for
like, it's
please
my
and
job to
thank
teach
you.
my
You would
child,
think that would
not
be
yours.
very, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah,
I can't
ideally it
remember
would
the
be,
exact, it was
but
3 years ago, but I can't remember the exact situation. But I was like, what do you mean? Your child, like I'm being, so I feel like that's hard too. You have a lot like that as well.
Well, and I think
Here,
that goes back to also like that's where your leadership backs you up too. Like this is also us being morally responsible and socially responsible to our community and making sure we are, teaching students the way that we want to see our society or that the community wants to see the society go.
And that is our
yeah.
responsibility.
Hmm.
I
When you
agree completely
said
with that.
when you said parent teacher conferences, I had conferences today and yesterday, and one of my parents didn't sign something because their son didn't read it, and she said I wasn't going to sign it. I told my son I wouldn't sign it. And I said, that's okay. That's good because you're teaching him integrity.
Mm.
And I said, and that's far more important than coming with the paper signed to school. And so I think that because of all of our focus on our virtues, that just kind of slipped right out of my lips. And I'm like, oh, that's good. I was,
all right, somebody got
I
kicked
was,
out. I have to go. Somebody got kicked out. I got to go find somebody.
Hi.
We'll get you.
Sorry.
It's
I'm
okay.
like in between. So I'm like, let me join back in so I don't miss, I just don't I just
Gotcha.
want
Okay.
to thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
so, and it doesn't, yeah. So like it doesn't, like if you have students with like different levels of language access, the animated shorts, I can share I have a whole list of them
I feel like
actually.
animated shorts are so engaging for kids too.
Mhm.
I didn't think about using those to help teach some of those themes within social responsibility for like second step things. I will usually do like a TED talk or something if I'm like this TED talk goes along with this courage that we're talking about. But I think that using the animated shorts will definitely help, and I like that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's like a whole uh definitely have some on courage, so I can share
Mhm.
the list with you guys. There's definitely ones, there's like a bunch of ones that was created by this organization that I think trains seeing dogs for
Mhm.
people who have visual difference. And so there's like a whole thing on that. It's really cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well,
Yeah.
share it with me too. Share it with everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Please.
yeah. I'll share the list. I developed it originally because I was trying to teach elements for theory of mind, because that's a deficit area for my students.
Yeah.
and I had to teach it without in a way that was very visual.
Hmm.
So I'll share my worksheet. And then I have like in one column, like some of the areas you can talk about, like perspective taking and like things like that. Or maybe can I just share it with you, Dr. Spellman, and you can send it out to everyone?
I
That'll be
can do
easier.
that. I'd be happy
Okay,
to.
awesome.
Okay.
But
The
they're
next.
really fun. The kids love the
Yeah.
animated
Yeah.
shorts.
Grown-ups like them too.
Yeah, that's what we just said. They're really engaging.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you saw the one, sorry, I'm puppy sitting here while I'm here. The we use that one for Brene Brown as well. The little one for empathy and sympathy. Any of those little ones I think are so they just stick in your mind better, right? It maybe goes back to our other parts of our brain, you know.
Yes, exactly. And we talk about even identifying like emotions and why those people feel those emotions. Because like you have to understand that to take another person's perspective
Yeah.
and to have empathy, you know what I mean? And even
Mm.
that's like challenging for my students. Like sometimes they can't identify the emotion, or they can identify the emotion, but they don't understand why the character's feeling that way.
Okay. That whole loss of hearing it really impacts their language and their understanding so much. Yeah. I think you see that at the other extreme, and this is probably off the wall, but I think you see the other extreme of that when you're around senior citizens that are losing their hearing. And they're if they're like my father was, they don't want to use hearing aids and things, and so then they begin to not be able to relate because they're missing all those cues. Yeah,
Yeah.
the other
Yeah,
end,
exactly.
the other end of the spectrum. Yeah. Oh, that's depressing. Okay.
All right. So going back to our questions, are we on four? Do either of these leadership virtues represent a growing edge for you? So that's citizenship, fairness, leadership.
Well, I'd say leadership. That's why I'm in this program.
Yeah.
I would agree with leadership as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say same for me. I also really liked, I know we're going to talk about fairness next, but I felt like your lecture, Dr. Spielman, really made me think about fairness and really made me think about like putting my opinions aside and like looking at just I feel like we always put our emotions into things and like, oh, look up the circumstances of this child. They should get a pass because they're going through this, or this is, and then like understanding that fairness is like taking all the emotion out and this is what happened and this is the rule. And I kind of struggled with that. Like I understand,
Mhm.
but the emotional piece of me is like, I don't know. I struggled with that a little bit.
It's funny because I actually today we did an escape room with my students and
So
a
did we.
group a group
Did
a
you do the
group
math turkey escape room in math?
no, we did it was an ancient China escape
Oh.
room because we just finished up our ancient China unit. But like I do it with sixth grade and they were really upset because this group of two boys apparently cheated and got for like finished up the escape room first, and it was because I had my screen with the answers opened up when they had came over, and I tried to quickly like click away from it, but like the code was in bright red, like big and bolded on my screen. And so like they solved it first. And like I assumed that they had seen it. They claimed that they did not. And like all my students were just like, that's so unfair. And they were just like, Miss Kistler, though, like they cheated. They said that they cheated. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I understand that you're all feeling a sense of justice right now and that you all want fairness, but like I can't prove that they cheated. I understand possibly that I went wrong with that by having my document opened up and they came over and possibly saw it, but like that fair, like sometimes like things don't always seem fair, but in this case, like this is what is fair. Like they solved it first. Like they got like a keychain for winning.
Yeah.
So
much more of like veterans kind of look at children. Like I have plenty of colleagues who haven't been back to school in like 20 years. So and should I punish them for that, right? Should I consider them less than just because their education isn't up to date? Or like the newer teachers who are coming in and it's like they have so much up to date information, but they haven't gone through the same types of struggles that like, us, 20-year veterans have gone through, right? So um I think for me, like leadership really becomes this idea of like, how do I find this balance and this fairness amongst all of these like different like entities, right? And then like with schools demographically changing, um, and like what's happening in society itself, I think really being able to kind of creating and sharing and developing an understanding and a knowledge that's going to be able to kind of get us to that next hump and that next piece. And how do we leave this place better than we arrived as a collective, right? Especially when you're in a leadership position.
Mhm.
Oh, that's a good point. And we all picked different ones because I picked the idea of building relationships, which I think goes along with all of these too. I like that you mentioned that they're not like extra and they're at the core of um, leadership and of schools, especially because like we work as a collaborative team most often. And it made me think of I'm sure everybody's seen this TED Talk, like the Rita Pearson maybe, where
Mhm.
she's like, you kids can't learn from people they don't like. And I feel like any paper I've ever written, I've talked about how building relationships is the foundation. And I feel like he made that really clear, not even like at schools, but like in any workplace. And I feel like kids are more successful when you have really good relationships, and teams are more successful when you have good relationships. So I feel like that is at the foundation of it all.
Relationships are better when you have good relationships.
Exactly. Mm.
Should should we move
Oh,
into the evidence and about equitable school leadership? Or Dr. Spelman,
yeah.
would you like to kind of contribute to that piece?
No, no, I'm just here to listen, eavesdrop.
Okay.
Cool. The
Um,
first, go ahead.
no, please go ahead.
The first one is the equity one. It says, what is your definition of equity for schools or district? How can we ensure our work aligns with this definition? Anyone? I mean, I can share my definition. I said it means giving each student the specific supports that they need and not treating everybody the same and giving them exactly what they need. Like,
through
Can't
and
keep up.
I changed my mind on that because of this, because like you were saying how
Yeah.
you treated one child differently because of his heart was so tender, right? And so I thought of the two sisters with the teachers. And remember, I was of the persuasion that we should just let them go. We should fire
Yes.
them. That's it.
Yeah, I remember you being
And then
like,
I
we're
was
just done
thinking
with
about it.
this.
I was thinking about it all week. Yeah, I know. I was thinking about it
I
all
remember.
week because I thought I I was like, no, because it was not, look at who the person is, and that it was really not indicative of who she is. She's
Mhm.
That's not like her to push her sister. And so if you look at, I mean, we're all human, we all make mistakes. So I think I would go back and I would give her that second chance. I think I was too harsh that last week.
I love that you reflected
Yeah.
on it all week. Karen,
All week. All
like
week.
going to bed, she's like, I made the wrong decision. I made the wrong decision.
I
feel
I
like
did.
with always
That's
those
hilarious.
dilemmas, I always think about it like the next like day or two of like, like,
Yeah.
did I do like, was that the right thing? Because I remember thinking about it and I'm like, well, should we, from some of the other options or some of the others that others, were bringing up, I always think like after I'm like, is that the choice, you know, like, or should it be somebody else? And I'm like, I don't know. I want to ask somebody and give them the dilemma at school. And what would you do? You know? Well, then I went back to what's best for kids, right? And so remember with
Right.
Alex, we came up with in our group that we said, well, it is best for kids that he stay because he was such an excellent coach, an excellent teacher.
Yeah.
And with these two teachers in the preschool, that especially the older sister was a very good teacher and a leader, and it would be best for kids if she stayed. It's just that she had a moment and she didn't hurt a child. You know,
Right.
Always
it was
important.
just a moment. So she thinks I would re-guide her. I wouldn't. Last week I was ready to fire her.
You were. You're like, we're done with this girl.
I was. Yeah.
I think I was more on the side of like, maybe we could give her another chance.
Yeah. I was like,
That was
yeah, I don't
funny.
know. I was being
That's
indecisive.
hilarious.
So
That's
I don't
funny.
know.
Is
I
it
feel
bad that I don't always think about those? Does that mean I make decisions too fast? And I just go with it?
You've got to use that reflection framework. It slows you
Yeah,
down.
Yeah.
it really
yeah.
does. I think about them sometimes, but definitely not as much, which is so funny. I'm like, wait, maybe I need to go back. I like that you connected that though, Carrie.
Yeah.
It's a good connection.
Yeah, because then I feel like it kind of goes with like I feel like both leadership virtues represent like a growing edge because it's like we're still like learning, we're still learning how to apply it, especially with these dilemmas and thinking about those different choices based on everybody is different and
Yeah.
like what we were saying from last week, like one of the teachers, like it wasn't typical behavior for them. So it makes me think like, well, I feel like both are kind of a growing edge because I still feel like I need to learn more and practice applying it to kind of continue to grow, I don't know.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's like both that I'm thinking about like but then I say that for all like I feel like I need to grow in all areas because like, it's all new and I'm trying to, practice and apply and reflect on it all and while everything's happening so fast. So
So reflection is definitely one of those growing edges for me. Like just like I constantly try to, but sometimes I'm just like, okay, decisions made. And so that's definitely like something like a point of weakness that I'm still growing in and working on. And so
but there's a
I kind of, no, sorry, you go, Carrie.
I was going to say there's a strength in that too,
I
because
was thinking
I tend to question myself back and forth and back, and I can see good in both choices. And it
yeah.
will take me forever to make a decision. Like, that phrase, paralysis by analysis. That is me. And so, but given time, like given this week, I firmly believe is that I like that choice of sisters together or on and giving them support to help them but with really hard situations it takes me a long time to make a decision so I can appreciate the fact Megan that you can make a decision because
I
sometimes you do
agree.
sometimes you just have to make a decision.
It's, yeah.
State.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I didn't want to leave them and they were super supportive, but
mhm.
I mean, they did everything they could. But
Wow. Dr. Spielman, just to pencil you in, we started talking about fairness, and then I brought up my own ethical dilemma that happened in my school about a teacher who was promised a position, and then the principal ended up opening the position, interviewing, and then felt like another candidate was better qualified than this teacher who had gone back to school, got all of her endorsement, and then was promised the position and gave it to somebody else. So, and I said, like, because of that decision, the morale of our school has really gone down and the trust is no longer there. And our staff, our sense of belonging is like the lowest it's ever been. So we were saying, like, ethically, was that the right call? Was that the right call to give the person who was more qualified and give that person the position or to put this other teacher who still would have been great in this position in that role. So we were kind of discussing this, and then Megan shared with us that she actually had a similar ethical dilemma that was about her personally, and we were discussing like the fairness of the leaders and the decision that they made.
It's a very muddy water, isn't it? I mean, because you have to, and you don't know what the politics are. You don't know what you don't know what's been coming at them from other levels, right? So sometimes the principal's decision is not just their decision alone. Um, and it's interesting, and I kind of shivered inside when you said she was promised a position because that's something that's not we can't, no one can promise a position, right? Especially if it was something that was well in the future, that eventually if you do this you can move into that kind of thing. So yeah, that's a very tricky one. I would say there were mistakes made early on and
Right.
then and right through the process. Yeah.
So let's all write that down in permanent marker. Never make any promises.
Yeah. Yeah, because you don't know, and the thing is, if someone, if the position was open, that then like there obviously was some pressure somewhere to say you need to open this up, and I can see that from an administrative point of view. It's actually really bad practice to just promote from within without opening it up to a broader, um, audience. I mean, we do that even at the university level. It's pretty hard and fast with us that if a position is opening it up, it has to be a complete open search, and anyone inside or outside can apply. And then we usually have committees which also helps to do it. So we have a search committee that people of different, some people in that department, some people outside of the department. And then all they do is, kind of narrow it down to like the top 2 or 3 finalists, and then the decision is made at the top. But I think there's a lot of prevention that could be done there if you had a good practice in place that, there's, it gets political when you think about it, right? I mean, if you read the Chicago newspapers, everything's been going crazy about that one alderman who rigged it so that his second in command could actually get the position that he's retiring from without any election or anybody going against it. So that doesn't smack of fairness either, right? So that's the hard part with these is you got to look at it from different angles, and I can see the teacher's angle, I can see the teacher's perspective, and I can also see the administrative perspective. So yeah.
Yeah, we were saying that we were like, what if we were the principal, what decision would we make? It's hard to we said it was like an ethical dilemma. It's hard to know what the best decision.
Yeah, you'd probably land on an option C where, well, it should have been this in the beginning, therefore we wouldn't have gotten here, is that kind of thing. Or if we need to develop a policy so this doesn't happen again. So
Right.
mistakes, yeah, mistakes on all ends. Yeah, but and then always there's someone who's hurt, right? So and
Process is the key.
and I think the other problem that you think about there, and hope it doesn't happen, is, but like you said, the morale is low. People are rallying around this person who's been there a long time and was promised a position. So what about the poor person that's coming in and doesn't know all of that?
Well, that's what this.
They're going to be, yeah. I mean, I literally walked into a position like that one time, where there was all this interviewing, and there was somebody there that thought they had it in. It was a promotion from within, and I was hired from the outside, and it was rough on me for the whole first year, because there were people that hated me for no reason. I mean, I didn't have anything to do with it. I didn't know there was an inside candidate. I didn't know there was somebody that people were trying to, jockey the position for. So then, you got to look at all of the stakeholders and all of the perspectives. So I hope your faculty will be kind to the person that came in because it wasn't their fault.
People really like him.
That's good. That's good. I feel better now. Okay.
Dr. Stillman, where were you? I didn't realize that you were principal. Were you in elementary or?
Elementary.
Okay. Locally or?
Tinley Park.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Memorial Elementary School, District 146. Yeah. Long time ago.
I actually have a similar fairness example.
That's exactly what I do as well. Like it's either like as a collective, yeah, or and like like for like people who are in like my sports, because I coach wrestling, like for them, I'll say I love you because like we go through war together, those types of things. Yeah, but like especially in the secondary level, I think because maybe they understand love and that it's much more complex. I think, yeah, it makes it a little bit more difficult than, right? Gender plays a role in it. So does like, potentially like race and ethnicity. Because like
Mhm.
I'm in my high school setting, like there are very few like of us who are like males of color, for example, so that like they get a different type of kind of relationship in that sense, right? So, in thinking of that idea of like a sense of belonging and all of you have said this like about building relationships and like adapting to the different individuals. Like the first thing I thought about when it comes to like equity is like, am I willing to adapt to them? Like, am I willing to adapt to anyone that I come around? And I feel like I am, which then in my brain makes me think like, okay, cool, like that is how I show a sense of equity, because I might not interact with all of you, but I do care enough about every single one of you to be able to be like, I am going to give you, the benefit of the doubt in a situation. Like I am going to try to go out of my way and to try to like provide you this thing. I mean, obviously, like after a while, you kind of start figuring out, like, hey, I got to be direct with this person while this person needs a little bit more of that flexibility and grace. But I also think about it's also about like the individual themselves, like for example, myself also understanding like my biases and what I'm bringing and what I'm coming in with, right? Because there are times when a student is on their phone as I'm teaching and I'm getting evaluated, and all I want to do is like, are you kidding me? Like, don't you care about me? Right? And then at the same time, it's like later on, it's like, hey, my mom's in the hospital, my guy, like I needed to text her, right? So it's like those little things, and but in the moment you're like me, myself, like I'm the one getting evaluated. So like you said it, Angelica, it's like thinking that like thinking the bigger picture that like there's a reason why these individuals are doing these types of things, right? Like something is behind the curtain, so to speak. And a sense of belonging is like taking people for where they're at and who they are and where they can become or what they can become.
I think that leads us really nicely into the next question. It says, how can we create a culture of equity where all employees feel respected and supported? Um, Kind of like you said, I feel like recognizing your biases is the first step. And then making sure that when you have things like committees and anything where you have decisions, you make sure that you have a very diverse group of people making those decisions. So, for example, last year we had a reading, we are trying to find a new reading curriculum, and we had a reading committee, but the reading committee was only made up of first and second year teachers, and everybody was really young. And a lot of people in the district had a big problem with that because they felt like it wasn't a good representation for what people wanted. So they ended up going to the union with that. And I feel like in situations like this, like if it was a more diverse committee, maybe the outcome would have been different. And it was definitely something to think about deeper than just to take the first 10 volunteers that you see.
I think too,
Your
like
support.
along with that, with like how
Yeah,
I'm sure it works aligns with this definition, our work, I think educating students on what equity means as well. So when they do notice that somebody might be getting something different than them, understanding why they are, or even, the community as well. I think that goes on to teachers and staff and parents too, like making sure that they understand what equity truly is and how to lay it out in an appropriate manner.
I agree with that. I try to, because it's hard to bring like a large word like this into a first grader's brain, So anytime they ask me, they're like, why is this kid going to do this? Why is this, you know what I mean? My main answer is always like, they have different needs than you, or they have different things that they need to be successful. And so I think that's like the way of doing it, but in a first grade mind. So I
Mhm.
do think it'd be interesting to hear it like from other teachers on how they do that in their classrooms, especially at the upper grades.
Um, I had a really good analogy that someone told me one time to explain it to kids, and that was just it was very simple. It was like some people need glasses, other people don't need glasses. So if we just have different needs. So I thought, wow, that makes a lot of sense, and I can understand
Yeah.
that.
That's a very simplified like way, like more
Yeah.
kid-friendly way to
Yeah.
explain it.
I like that, Carrie.
Yeah. So the next one is how can we create a sense of belonging for all people so that they feel heard and valued? So for myself, I thought of like things that are or not our admin, building admin have implemented or allowed, have invited in, and thinking it more of like the kid perspective. That's what like automatically I went to. I think that's just like my automatic response to the teachers always to go like kid more than like adults. But this year they started PAC, which is the Principal Advisory Committee, and I think that shows the equity because it's allowing them to voice their concerns within the school and come up with solutions to those um, concerns or things they want to see change. And that I think has helped so far them feel like they like report. So it's not obviously every single student. I think it's only third, fourth, and fifth grade. I know fourth and fifth for sure. But they like report out, like, how our committees report out, maybe like mine at my school, we report out our committee meetings, like what we said or what we're working on, and they report out to their classmates of what they're working on so that they all feel included and kind of take back to their meetings, like what else they would want to be seen. So it's like they have their own, like they're seeing themselves and being heard, feel like or are being heard and valued in that way. And I also think like student councils as well is another way of showing that through the student perspective.
I
Um,
love that. That's so
yeah,
cool that you guys are doing that.
yeah. This is the first year. It's a slow rollout, and they're only focused right now on like what are they focusing on? One of the five essential questions. Oh, and no, I can't think of it. It'll come back. It'll come back to me. I just can't think of. There's so many questions that I cannot think of which one it is. But and they're like creating a video to explain what it is so that students understand more deeply than they would, just reading it off a page themselves. But then then going back, I thought of two like for but staff wise, addressing the concerns once they come forth, and especially obviously once you have all the information, but not letting it be like, well, I'm too busy for this. I'm going to get to it later, because then it's kind of like you're not respecting that employee's concern or multiple, maybe it's a group. Um, and then they don't feel supported or trust that you will listen to him again when another concern comes up.
And I
Um, to actually look at the strategic plan though, I was on the strategic planning team. So my paper
Hmm.
just felt very like it was very like full circle for me for that paper. It was like I was like, wait, this is what I would do different if I were the administrator in this position, and like this is what I would have done differently like if I would have known all this. I mean, because I didn't even know a strategic plan existed before 2 years ago.
Yeah. And
Well,
coming from
that's
like
awesome.
I'm from like a very large district, so like we are very disconnected from our strategic plan. I put that in my paper, Dr. Spillman. I was like, but it like I couldn't even find the information. Like when was this developed? When was this like how was this developed? I had to rely on the website and even asking my principal, she was like, "Ooh, a couple of years ago." Like
Wow.
couldn't give me
Yeah.
We just wrote ours, like, or finalized it in March. So I feel like if we hadn't just like done it, I would not have known, but
I
I've
would
seen it.
suggest though that if you get asked to be on the team, be on the team. It's so fascinating, all the things that you learn about the district and just like the process and steps of doing it was like it was so weird to reread it and then to criticize it as well because it was like, wait, like we should have done this differently. Like
Yes.
we should have done this instead. And I mean, again, it was just so like just the most full circle moment for me when I was writing my paper. I was like, this is so weird. Like I should
So
have, sorry,
did
go
you
ahead.
feel like you were looking at it like from a different lens after all the stuff we learned in the class? Like you saw it a little bit differently?
Oh, definitely. Like in the moment, like I remember feeling certain ways when we were creating it, just like we actually ended up like, and funny enough is actually one of the papers that I was looking at as an example. Like I scrolled down and I was like, I'm in District 62. And I was like, I'm in District 62 too. And then I was like, oh my, so reading that person's paper and then like thinking about like what I knew about the strategic plan was just kind of funny. But like we had parents, community members, district admin. We didn't just have teachers, we had staff members. So like there was a para on one of the teams that I was on. And we had parents, students, eighth grade students, and former students coming in. It was a
Cool.
very big team, and it was awesome to have all that. But like the kids were selected by just like they got recommended for it. And that when my students found out that one of my students was going into these meetings with me and got a day off of school, but they were just like, well, we have ideas as well. And so I thought about it and I was like, well, I probably would have put it out as like an application for kids because I think then you could have gathered more data from that because it is affecting them. And that was our superintendent's perspective. He's like, it's affecting the students directly. So let's find out what the students want, what the students need. All the kids that were on it were good kids though. But like not all the parents were always there because it was a whole work day. But also though, like the dates were sent out well in advance. There was one parent that I knew that was on the team that I never saw. So I was like, okay, we probably could have put a different parent in there, but
Funny.
I can always tell when there's good conversations going on because I push that button and it gives you 60 seconds and everybody does wait until you're pulled back. So it's good. So anything in particular that you'd like to share? Like there were a lot of great conversations going on, but anything that you think would be great to share with your classmates from your discussion? Edwin, thanks.
One thing that I found to be like both interesting and like um, very fulfilling is the fact that like when we were even, for example, looking at like the moral pieces or like the five components of leadership, the fact that like everyone had a different, they had chosen a different one, right? And they kind of spoke to it, um, but we all kind of came to the same consensus, right? As to like ultimately like what it is that we were trying to kind of focus on. um, so that was something that we kind of as we got into other conversations, especially the ones around things like equity, it's like we kept that lens in mind, but we all kind of somehow came back to the same conclusion. So like I
Awesome.
was very appreciative of that approach.
Thank you. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. Anything else? Other things that came up that were interesting? Can I out you, Carrie, about your still working on the ethical dilemma from last week?
Oh, yes, you can. Do you want me to talk about it?
Yeah, just for a minute.
So our ethical dilemma last week when the two sisters were in the daycare and the one pushed the other. I was saying in our group that I was thinking about that all week. And last week I was pretty firm. I'm like, we need to fire them both because they were putting the safety of the students in danger. And um yeah, so then as the week went on and I was thinking about it and I was thinking, if you look at the heart of both of those people, it wasn't it didn't define who they are, because who they are, that the one sister who was kind of more the role model, she was a good teacher and she was a good leader. It's just that she had this one faltering thing that happened. And so then, throughout the week I thought, oh, I would rethink that decision, and I would then go and help, offer help and support for them and keep them on board, because really, if it's coming down to what's best for students and what's best for kids, these teachers were good teachers, and it would be better for kids to have their teachers stay rather than just leave and have new teachers that you don't know anything about. So yeah, it was quite the week. I rethink this all the way all the time.
Okay. Anything else from any of your groups? You're good. Okay. It's 6:04. Why don't we take a break till 6:15 and then we'll come back for the main presentation, okay? Okay, I'm going to get started. So this presentation is going to be a little different, and I'll give you a little backstory about it. We're going to be talking about the work that was done by two gentlemen, Thomas Sergiovanni and Reginald Green. And these are two people that are what we would call thought leaders in educational leadership. These are two people that really were on the cutting edge of the whole concept of moral leadership. We kind of lost our way in leadership, over some of the decades. And it was interesting because Thomas Sergiovanni in particular, he was really one of the early champions saying that the most important thing was in training leaders is that we have to highlight the moral dimensions of leadership. And he argued that, that there are management theories but there are practices that need to be combined in order to turn the communities, the culture of these schools into kind of virtuous communities. And this was back like in the early, late 1980s and early 1990s, which was kind of unheard of. He was actually a professor in educational administration at University of Illinois in Champaign for many years, probably well over 2 decades. And then he moved to another university to take a specific endowed chair at the university. I think it was Trinity University in San Antonio. And he passed away, I think, about 12 years ago. Reginald Green, who is his co-author that we're going to feature tonight, and he was a co-author in many different things. He was originally he was at Wright State University as an educational administration professor, and then he moved to the University of Memphis. And last time I checked, I have a friend that teaches at the University of Memphis, and he's still there. So one of the things that's kind of interesting, and just kind of a backstory, is that when I first came to North Central College, someone else was teaching this course. Okay. There was another professor that was teaching this course and had been kind of embedded there for quite a few years. And this course was basically that book that she just taught, that book, and great things in that book, right? Great theories, great principles, great things. And part of it was because when she had gone to school at U of I, Dr. Sergiovanni had been one of her professors. So she was really, quite enthusiastic about it. I love the book. But I did feel that when I moved into the position after she retired and I moved into the position to teach the course, that I would like to make sure that I do shed some light on their thought leadership, but that there were a lot of others I wanted to introduce as well. So, that's kind of why this course and is kind of like I kind of refer to it as kind of a smorgasbord, right? Because I really try to offer you a lot of different leadership um, theories and theorists so that you can kind of pick from there what fits for you and put it in your toolbox. So just a little bit of history about Thomas Sir Giovanni and Reginald Green. So one of the things that was really interesting in this book that they co-authored together is that they talked about the fact that leadership is such a personal thing. And when they wrote the original version of this book, that was an unknown concept, really. And he, in particular, Sergio Giovanni, taught very clearly that there were three important dimensions that we needed to look at in terms of a leader. We needed to look at their heart, we needed to look at their head, and we needed to look at their hands. And when he talked about heart, he has to talk about like, what the beliefs, the values, the dreams, the personal vision, right? What someone really was committed to when they're taking a leadership role. In terms of the head, this is really kind of, where you really have to study the theories, right? You have to study the management and the operations pieces, but you have to be able to reflect on those and look at them in terms of combining that with your personal vision as to where you want to do and how you want to lead. And so he said that really always just takes you to the hand, right? Because the hand is where there's action, right? These are the decisions that are made. These are the things that then become part of the programs, the policies, the procedures. And how you actually try to do this is really important. He emphasized a lot of very, very clearly that an individual leader's personalities and responses to each situation are really unique. And that's really why, if you don't understand yourself, you're really not sure how to react to things. But that your decisions as a leader are very personal and so therefore very contextual. So that's why you probably, think about there are times when there are people who are in leadership positions and they make very different decisions. But a lot of it has to do with, first of all, their heart, their head, and then the context and how it goes through. So, when they talk about this, they really went into some things that were kind of interesting. So if you would go to your Canvas course right now, and you go into our week 7, into the presentation materials, you'll see there is a document there that's called 13 core competencies. And I just refer to it because you can, if it might be easier for you to read along as I'm kind of going to kind of read from it to you. But it's a PDF and you're welcome to follow along with me. But they came up with 13 core competencies that they felt were really important for leaders. And if you kind of look at all of these, and they always all start with management of, right? So in terms of management of attention, that's where they were referring to the idea of focusing on, values, ideals, and goals and purposes and things that bring people together, and how effective leaders manage attention by what they say, what they reward, how they spend time, and the behaviors they emphasize and the reasons they give for the decisions that they make. So really being attentive to that part of their role. In terms of the management of meaning, that's really where they make connections, right? Connects with teachers, with parents, with students in such a way that they, are able to look at their own strengths and how they are interested in other people, how they connect with other people, and how they build hope. So there's this, whole idea of a focus on what's important in a school. He also talks a lot about trust. And that's, that really it's so critical for leaders to be able to be seen as credible and to be seen as legitimate and to be seen as honest, right? Because not only do they make important decisions, but they also should be taking those decisions. And as you know now from this past week, connecting them to the mission and the vision of the school, right? Their mission and the vision should be the lighthouse. That should be what's really guiding all decisions. They also talk about management of self. It's like it's so important to know who you are, what you value, what you believe, and why you behave the way you do. This is something that's often neglected in leaders, that they don't take the time to understand their why, understand their purpose. Paradox is something that leaders manage all the time, right? And this is where you have to bring together ideas that maybe even seem at odds. And this is where you get really effective leaders, that they know how to take a look at the ideas and values and visions and strive to bring everyone together in a common quest, right? To share, kind of get people coagulate around shared values. And while still honoring diversity, but also wanting to promote innovative ideas. And then in terms of effectiveness, that's really kind of the where they want you to focus on and talk about focusing on the capacity that a school has to improve its performance. This is where effective leaders really can dig into like providing professional development that's really appropriate for that particular faculty, not just because it's the flavor of the week, but what's needed in that school for that group of teachers. Management of follow-up, I think, is something that we can all kind of understand just by the language, what it is, right? Because when you are involved in things and you are in the trenches with teacher and you follow through on your word, it's a very core thing that leaders need to have. Management of instructional leadership is something that is powerful. And sometimes that gets on a back burner. The larger the school is, the further back that gets from a leader. And that's important because when you talk about creating a community of learners and using data to make instructional decisions, leaders need to be able to know how to do that and how to manage that. Even way back then, they were talking about managing diversity, right? And talking about creating an environment where everything is valued, everyone's contributions are valued. Management of responsibility, internalization of the values and the purposes, right? When you think about leadership as being morally based, and then it has an impact on the spirit and the commitment of the school, and it really can establish the culture. And then we talk a little bit about collaboration, which of course is important, right? This is where you have to create a caring and safe community. This is where you have to have that holding environment. You have to have that trust, and you have to have that responsibility that's there. And this is where you actually want to help people move towards collaboration because they feel safe, right? You encouraged dialogue, a critical dialogue, even from different, viewpoints, because that's okay. That's all part of it. And then in terms of reflection, I was always impressed that they really hit hard on reflection because they talk about the importance of reflecting on our actions. And it's all about, modifying future practices, also self-improvement. And that's something that as a teacher, I think we do pretty often, but maybe not enough as leaders. And then the last one they talk about is the whole idea of effective leaders creating an empowering environment, a learning community, someplace that supports innovation, that involves people in decision making, and that we're looking at professional development, that we're all in an atmosphere of learning. So when you think about those 13 core competencies, what are some of the prime ones that you are noticing right now the leaders in your building actually are showing, are really kind of emulating and modeling?
I feel like I immediately gravitate towards the second one, management of meaning, and the ability to connect teachers, parents, and students to the school in such a way that they find their lives useful, sensible, and valued. So I feel like our school does a really great job of allowing teachers to follow their own passions by having after school extracurriculars and clubs. And then we promote students to take on those clubs. And we sometimes ask our teachers to seek out some students who may or may not seek out those opportunities on their own, but maybe just need somebody else to see a strength in them and be like, I think you would be great for this club. And then that's the only push they need. And then I think in the end, they all end up finding meaning and they're happier because of it.
Cool. Thank you. Anyone else?
I think my school is doing well on the management of collaboration. We just started something called Power Huddles this year, which is new for us. So our lunch hour is a half an hour. And then after lunch, we meet for a half an hour, just our grade level team every day. And we talk about stuff, which that's new for us. And when we first started it, we thought, oh my goodness, a half an hour every day. That's a little over the top. And actually some days it is exhausting because sometimes you'd rather have an hour lunch than go work. But it has been very effective, especially with our new implementation of the new ELA curriculum. And we just implemented standards-based grading this year. So we've had two major changes that the collaboration piece is really key, and it's been helpful.
Cool. That's great to see.
Mhm.
Anyone else?
I would say my school does a really great job of management of instructional leadership. I feel like we meet grade level. We have grade level PLCs with our admin once a week where we go over different assessment data and we discuss like what we're doing in the classroom instructional wise and discuss like where we want to go next. We discuss our small group data. We discuss like our MTSS students and if we have concerns with students during that time, and that's weekly. So I feel like then our administration is really attuned to what's going on grade level teams, and teachers feel like a voice and they feel like they're being heard and have like a problem solving platform.
That's powerful. That's great. Thank you for sharing. I think my only problem with their 13 core competencies is that I think if we start looking at that, I have to have all of those, it's going to get very overwhelming, right? But I do think understanding those core competencies and understanding, the definitions that are there on that PDF file can kind of help you when you need it, right? When the situation arises, when you need to reach for that competency, right? And that as you go through the program, looking at the fact that you want to work on your attention and your meaning and your collaboration and all of those things. So I think it's definitely something that I always feel is worth sharing. So back to their to their book, which I have devoured so many times. But what I think is kind of interesting is they have a great way of just kind of defining certain types of leaders and defining different concepts of leadership. And one of the things that I like is that they talk about followers versus subordinates. And they say that followership is really the goal. You want people that are following you, not that are just going to be subordinate, because when you think about it, there's a different kind of hierarchy that emerges there. When you think about good followers, they manage themselves well, they think for themselves, they exercise self-control, they accept responsibility, they believe and care about what they're doing, they're self-motivated, and they can really do it with persistence and without close supervision. Followers are generally people that are committed to a set of purposes that are, similar to the leader. They have a shared vision, they have shared beliefs and shared values. And when you think about it, the people that are subordinates are people that just kind of respond and comply, not necessarily by they do what they're supposed to do. Your subordinates are the people that do just what they're supposed to do, but nothing else, very little else. They want to know specifically what's expected of them. And without proper monitoring and supervision, they wouldn't necessarily perform well. But as long as they're supervised, they're okay. They want to know the rules of the game and they'll play the game. They'll avoid problems. But when you're talking about it, unfortunately, if you've got a lot of subordinates in your school, excellence kind of goes out the window and mediocrity is what becomes the norm of the culture. So what you want to develop as a leader is followers, right? Because subordinates will kind of respond to authority, but followers respond to ideas. And so when you're talking about that, it's important to get your people to be followers and not necessarily subordinates. Another thing that they talk about, and I love when we talk about this part, is that they talk about the importance of the leader's mindscape. And that, your mindscape really influences what you see and how you act and what you believe and what you do. Now, Sir Giovanni and Green talk about two very distinct mindscapes, the neats and the scruffies. So as I'm talking about these, I want you to think about the leaders that you work with. So they talk about the neats being people that they think of, leadership as kind of an applied science. They believe it's possible to find the one best way to lead. They really kind of function as almost what you would call like a highly trained technician. Your scruffies, on the other hand, they kind of look at educational administration as kind of messy, more like it's craft-like. They think that leadership can be kind of characterized by interaction, reflection, and action, kind of that kind of thing. They think theory and research is important, but it's only one source of knowledge. So they basically have very different conceptions of what leadership is, and they actually, when you think about it, The NEETs kind of think that theoretical knowledge is superordinate to practice. The Scruffies say it's important, but it's subordinate. The NEETs believe it's possible, to find one best way to practice, one best set of standards, one best list of school characteristics, and that really is what will make their school effective and make them effective leaders. They tend to be looking at things like generic sets of teaching skills that they want people to do that should be applied by all teachers for all students and in all situations. They don't really look at context. They don't look at values and processes. And when you look at different types of research on leadership styles and conflict management theories, they want those to be like truths that are accepted. But the needs really don't fit that well into the real world of school leadership because, as I said before, leadership is messy. The Scruffies kind of think of it more as a practical application of a science. It stems from theory and knowledge, but with that, they reflect on things. They understand that knowledge is something that can be used contextually. So when you think about your current leaders, are they neats or are they scruffies? Nobody knows.
As you were talking about that, I was thinking like I feel like my principal is more of a neat and the assistant principal is more of a scruffy. But then again, like my principal is so good at what she does. But it's like a yin and yang relationship for the two. So
That's a great point, Lauren, because that's one of the things that you want to think about as a leader, right? You want to look at the composition of your team, right? Your leadership team. You don't want a set of clones. I don't want five me's running a building, right? I want people that have things, capabilities, strengths, talents that I don't have because you want to balance that team so that there's all of that knowledge that can be used to really guide the ship in a good way. I think that's really powerful. Anyone else?
I feel like my leader is both. I feel like they are knowledge-based theory. They have a specific set of routines. They believe in certain best practices. They're standards driven, but also can also be very like loosely structured, very trusting of their staff, allow them to have creative flexibility and freedom in how they choose to work. And they're very intuitive.
Okay, all right. So let's talk a little bit more about what different types of things they've talked about. So we've talked about the neats and the scruffies. One of the things that they, particularly Reginald Green, he digs really deeply into these four dimensions that he talks about leadership. So imagine this is pretty dense. He talks about the importance of understanding yourself and others. And he talks about the fact that effective leaders really can clarify they know exactly what their strengths are, they know what their beliefs are, and they know how those personal aspects can actually be implemented in the school culture that they're in. The second one is understanding the complexities of an organizational life. And sometimes people don't go into leadership with their eyes wide open because schools are very complex. They're multifaceted. They require, leaders to really understand the culture, the climate, the structure, the makeup of the faculty, their needs, the expectations, the interactions of the community members. All of these kinds of things are really helpful because you really have to understand all the nuances. Third one that he talks about that's a really important dimension of leadership is building bridges through relationships. And this is something that you've heard me talk about many times. You'd heard Michael Fullen talk about it when I presented his material. Engaging in positive relationships with all the stakeholders is not an option. It's actually an imperative for leaders. So even people like me who are basically introverts, when you move into a leadership role, you have to put that aside and you have to actually move out and proactively build those relationships, and do it in a way that you're developing mutual respect, that you're fostering creativity and collaboration, you're opening lines of communication, and you're building that culture of trust. The fourth thing he talks about is leadership is important that you stay on top of best practices, right? So this is understanding the culture of the school, collecting data, looking at the research, working on your school improvement plans, All these things are important because what you need to do is master the knowledge and the decision making and the communication kinds of things. But these four practices or dimensions, they really are things that are blending the traditional with the humanistic, right? So it's traditional management practices, processes, and procedures, but putting those together with the humanistic processes, because this is important. Each one of these is good when they're implemented individually. They actually can make an important impact on a school. But if they can be done collectively, then you could be a powerful force in terms of being a leader in a school. They also talk about very heavily in their book about schools as a moral community. And they talk about that really and truly, that the leader's obligation is to protect the culture of the school and to build the character of the school as a whole. They talk about communities as collections of people who come together because they have common commitments. And they talk about schools in a way that they have different types of communities. There's your learning communities, right? This is where students and other members of the school community are committed to learning and thinking and growing. It's really a community of all learners, right? Learning is kind of an attitude, and it's kind of a way of life for everyone in this type of a group. Also, schools really are collaborative communities, and we've talked about that. You've highlighted that it's important. The idea of understanding that everybody's there for mutual benefit, we're pursuing common goals, and there's an interdependence, and so then a mutual obligation for us to help each other to succeed. Schools need to be caring communities. This is where, the characteristics that define relationships are important, and that relationships are moral in character and positive and supportive. Inclusive communities are really critical. This is where everyone commits them to a spirit of collective inquiry, reflecting on problems together, looking at solutions together. Talking about how to be a mutually respectful whole. Inquiring communities, same thing, that's the whole idea of reflecting on practice. Communities of responsibility, it's where, there's a shared community, a shared commitment that we're going to do this together. Agreed upon ways that we're going to execute our roles so that we're all contributing to this community. And then communities of practice. This is where, teachers are kind of informally connected to one another so that they can share something that's successful in their classroom. And so they begin sharing these ideas, and it helps to improve everyone's impact on the students in their classrooms. When you talk about your school, what are some of the elements of your school that tell you that it's really a moral community?
Our school, I would classify us as a caring community. We had a couple tragedies happen in a parent who actually was shot, and the school came around her and helped in different ways. We had a student who passed away from cancer last year, and we raised money. We did things for them. We have like the Christmas tree, giving Christmas tree in our foyer. We do book drives for lower income people, and we do pantry stuff. So I'm sure lots of schools do that, but
but hallmarks of a very caring community, yes, yeah, absolutely. Any others?
I think for my school, it's very much a collaborative community. We do a lot of vertical articulation, going down one grade and up one grade, which also helps us to figure out where students currently are at, or what they already should know and what they need to know in order to be successful in the following year, to expose them to other material and standards.
I think that, above and below grade level articulation is critical, absolutely critical. I'd like to see more schools doing it when children are moving from elementary to middle school and middle school to high school, because I think that articulation could be powerful there as well. It's a really good example of collaboration that benefits everyone, right? Okay, so we'll dig a little bit further into Reginald and Thomas. So one of the things they talk about in the book that I think is really interesting to kind of just think about and and to differentiate is the difference between social contracts and social covenants. And one of the things that's important is that when you think about a social contract is something that's going to involve some kind of a deal, right? Each of the party in the contract is going to give up something to the other party in order to get something else back, right? In this narrative, teachers, parents, others, they invest their energy, their talent into school in exchange for benefits, right? Children kind of endure the rituals of school in order to get gold stars and get the praise, right? To get the attention they want from their parents, to get grades they need to get into college. Um, the social contract is it's maintained and it's successful only as long as all the parties get what they want. And so when you think about teachers that don't feel like they're receiving their contractual benefits, they're less willing to invest in the school. And when students no longer see that they're getting benefits, they're less willing to endure school and to be engaged. So when you think about the social contract, it's really all about calculations that involve trade-offs, that incentives in exchange for compliance, right? Self-interest is kind of paramount in those kinds of situations. Now, when you think about social covenants, it's much less conditional, and connections are more really what you would call actually like moral rather than calculated. So when you think about covenants, you're thinking about marriages, extended families, faith communities, caring groups, those kinds of things. When you're thinking about social covenants, the connections that are created are connected to like shared ideas, shared visions, shared values. And that's what binds the people together. They form a fabric where things, they will engage in reciprocal roles. They will work together. And when you have a fabric that's woven together like that, it's really hard to tear it apart, because that fabric is really strong and it will endure. So a social contract, when you think about it, is really it's actually maintained by the promise of gain or perhaps the threat of external force, but it's very rules-based. When you talk about a social covenant, what you'll find there is the element of loyalty, fidelity, a sense of obligation and reciprocity. It's really very norms-based. So when you think about, and we're not going to break up into small groups for this, but Sir Giovanni and Green say that they really feel that schools should be founded on social covenants instead of contracts if they want to become a moral community. So would you agree or disagree? Have you thought about them that way before? Mhm.
I agree. And I think because I'm part of a very low incidence, very tight-knit community, the deaf community, like everyone knows everyone, it very much is that covenant feeling. And there's something about that makes us stronger and makes us it feels like it's us against the world a little bit. And so, it definitely, I would say we have a really strong program and the relationships are really strong. And that's definitely a positive because we feel so different.
But you have shared values, right? And you have a common purpose. And so
Exactly.
it's truly a covenant. It's not a situation where somebody's like, well, I'm not getting what I want, so I'm out kind of thing, or I'll phone it in, okay.
Exactly. And evidence, in my opinion, of that is there's been a huge special ed teacher shortage,
Mhm.
but our teachers never leave.
Interesting.
The deaf and hard of hearing teachers, they've been there for many years. They don't leave until they retire.
Yeah, I think actually you're right because I know there's a group of ladies in our neighborhood that they don't drive for Uber or Lyft, but they have their own little um, driving service. And one of them, several of them are teachers that will do like before and after school runs and things like that. And in the summertime, when I'm traveling, I always get a ride with one of the ladies that is a teacher of deaf and hard of hearing. And you're describing very much her personality, so, and her approach. Anyone else about a social contract in your building, or is it a covenant?
Our school is definitely a covenant. Most of our teachers have been there for over a decade, and all of our admin have been there for over 2 decades.
That's amazing.
We just, I feel like when people find their way there, they don't really leave. And it's amazing to me as well because I really admire these leaders I'm I'm like, wow, they're still here.
That's amazing because we just did a last night in the capstone class. We had a guest speaker who was, talking about many things because they're graduating in a week. But one of the things that she was sharing was, the percentages right now of people staying in schools, staying in leadership positions, and the statistics are scary in one sense, right? Because people are just not staying in leadership positions, but also that and I love the way she presented it. She's like, this is a ripe opportunity right now because there's a shortage of teachers and leaders in Illinois. And this is the time when people can move out and move in and really make a difference in schools because we have to stop this revolving door. There's so much that's lost when there's a revolving door in the schools. Great points. All right, let's keep going with Reginald and Thomas. Okay. So another thing that they talk about is the idea that there are some characteristics, some very strong characteristics that we find in nurturing schools. So what do we really mean by nurturing schools, right? So, but they did this extensive research, and I think Green actually led this research. And he did all kinds of research, all kinds of interviews, all kinds of surveys. And he ended up with kind of 13 different characteristics that he found in schools that really were nurturing. And then he kind of put them into themes. So the first theme he came up with was student-teacher relationships. And he talked about that when he was visiting and he was looking at the data from the schools that were really kind of labeled as nurturing, the kinds of things that you saw there is there's a mutual trust between teachers and students, very positive interactions, that teachers have a very in-depth knowledge of their students, they know their children well, and that there's teachers that really model that caring attitude for students. The second theme that he talked about was professionalism among the leaders and the faculty and the staff. And that in these kinds of schools, when it's a nurturing school, the teachers perceive that professionalism exists not only within themselves, but also in the administration and the rest of the staff. There's this strong sense of caring across the whole community. People are respected. And also that there's kind of a love for their subject matter and that that continuous improvement, constantly looking to build their skills to become more competent. And that so they're really kind of places of communities of learning. The third theme they found was the idea of the environment in the school and the classroom. And this one is really important because this is so important when we talk about it today as something that's critical. And that's that whole idea of belonging. The idea that students need to feel that the school environment is safe, that it's nurturing, and it's a place that they feel that they belong. So there's kind of a sense of family, right? Where everyone looks out for everyone else. People in that type of a community, they value differences, and everything that someone brings to the table is really kind of respected. People are respected for their wide range of talents, and also they bring in the community, right? The values of the community. There's a real strong connection. You'll learn a lot about this when you take the third course in the sequence, which is School Home Community, and it's taught by Dr. Azkoya. And he'll talk to you a lot about the importance of that, getting that connection between the community and bringing the community and the values of the community into the classroom. The last one theme that he found in these nurturing schools was really kind of interesting because it was really all about how the students felt about themselves, and that they need to feel valued. They need to feel that they have this kind of a self-worth. They need to feel safe. They need to be involved in their education. And they need to not only value themselves, but they need to value others. And so these are kind of things that are really powerful when you have a classroom and a community that moves in that direction. So this one is interesting. So they talk about leadership and they've sort of put it on a developmental continuum, which is good. I mean, I'm interested to see what you think about their talking here. So they have this developmental view of leadership, and they think that different stages of these types of leadership are appropriate for different buildings, for different circumstances. That successful school leaders kind of can gauge the situation, they get to know the territory, and they know that they can which type of leadership to provide. So not every situation requires leaders that use the same strategies, right? And no one approach will really be the best one that would really work. So when you think about these, think about bartering, okay? This is where a leader and the faculty kind of strike a bargain in which the leader kind of gives those being led something and, in exchange for what the leader wants them to do. So it's a barter game, right? So this is like trading wants and needs for cooperation and compliance, right? At the very basic level. And this is usually called for in a situation wherein the leader and the teachers just don't share common interests, common goals. And when the stakes in the school are different, the stakes for the leadership and the stakes for the teachers are different. Now, there's also building, right? So this is where leaders can provide a climate and a lot of interpersonal support. And that is really a place that's not based on trading, but more on providing the conditions that enable teachers to feel psychological safety and fulfillment and success. And so you're kind of moving from extrinsic rewards and bartering to more intrinsic rewards in building in your community. The next developmental level they talk about is binding. And this is where the leaders and the teachers work together to develop a set of shared values. They have relationships that are strong. They build ties to create so that they can become a community of learners. And they're very, very much a community of practice. The top level they talk about is bonding. And that's where the teachers and leaders are connected together in a way that just changes a community. They just are it's mutual agreement, mutual commitments. There's an interdependence. It's a fine-tuned machine. And when you're thinking about that, it's really where moral authority is coming in, and it's a whole community of mind. So when you take these four, you can think about them as developmental stages, but there's also other things that you can look at. So let's look at this. So thinking about transactional leadership, which is really where, the focus is on extrinsic motivations, right? And transformative leadership. And you could kind of put the leadership bartering, building, binding, and bonding in there, right? So you can think about it. Transformative leadership is going to really be focused on higher order. It's going to be more intrinsic motivation, more moral motives, and when you think about it, there's also the idea that you don't want to, if you're transactional, you're just bartering, right? You're just exchanging, as it says on the screen, human needs and interests, but it's really just kind of very superficial. But you can see that as you move through to building and to binding and bonding, now you're really moving into the areas of transformational leadership. And so what's important is to know your territory, know the people you're with, know the building that you're in, because it can make a difference. Bartering kind of provides the push to get things started. If you move into a building and you kind of get going and you build some foundation that way. But then when you move into building, then you're stepping up a little bit, and now you're moving in to create that psychological safety. And then when you kind of move a little bit stronger and you're there a little longer, you can get that binding there. And then bonding is when the people are just really so connected, and the bond of trust is the foundation for collaboration. So when you think about, Angelica, when you talked about your school and the fact that your leaders and your teachers have been there so long, I would love to go back and look at the history and bet that your leaders probably started with the bartering and then kind of gradually moved, a little bit up the line into the building, and then into the bonding, and then finally, into those final stages. What are your thoughts about that in terms of looking at something like that is developmental? Have you thought about leadership that way before?
Are you asking me or everyone?
Everyone.
Oh, okay.
No, I just was using yours as an example. I'm not putting you
Okay.
on the spot.
Yeah, no, I feel like immediately when I thought about this slide and it said like bartering, building, binding, bonding, I don't think of it as one consecutively leading into the other. I think of it as like they're constantly being utilized at different points. And I've been part of many interactions where I've seen my admin using different these different strategies, and sometimes like a few of them at the same time, like in a very like innocent, joking way, where it's like nobody, he has a way of like making the pressures disappear, and like he can have casual conversations about very serious things, but like he can barter with people and be like, well, we're not going to buy this new gymnastics mat for track. Do you have a cheaper one? And then he'll be like, okay, well, like, how are we going to do this? Or like, oh, I found money here. Like, I feel like in all those different tactics, they allow the person on the receiving end to feel more connected to the
Okay.
leader.
Those are so interesting examples. That's true. I think sometimes as a new leader, you come into a building where there's the toxic environment, and you're just basically trying to, let's wrap your head around what can I do with this institution? What can I do with this group? And I think that's where you can start with some bartering kinds of things. It is important to move, and I'll be real honest. This does not happen overnight. I can give a personal example of the building that I was principal at, and I remember the superintendent taking me for a walkthrough before I started, and giving me a laundry list of everything that was wrong, and everything that needed to be fixed in this building, which is not a great way to get somebody excited about the job, right? But I remember him saying, well, how long is it going to take you to turn this around? And I probably because I was very young and naive, I just looked at him and I said, "Oh, 5 years." And he was just kind of struck by what I was saying. It was like, "No, I don't have a magic wand." And I said, this isn't going to happen overnight. If you want me to take over this building, you're going to have to trust me, and you're going to have to give me 5 years, because there's a lot to be fixed here. There's a lot of damage to be undone. There's a lot of pain and hurt that needs to be relieved. And I remember him asking me, when we sat down for our goals for the first year, like, what is it you want to accomplish in the first year? And I said, I am not changing a thing in this school. I am going to spend the year getting to know everyone here, getting to know everyone from the bottom to the top, to getting to know the parents, getting to just get the pulse of what's happening here. Just spend the whole year getting to know everyone and getting them to know me. Then in the second year, I'll let's take some baby steps. But it was, it's something that goes through stages. And in the beginning, I had to do a lot of bartering. That, well, we want this or we won't do that. So, in order to get people on there, we had to make some contracts before I could get it to a covenant. Somebody had their hand up. Was it Edwin?
Yeah, that makes me think about like I just got to the school about 3 years ago. This is my third year here, and a lot of like the individuals that were here, 10 years ago plus, right? Like they talk about how there was this like massive like event where it just kind of like there was a huge breakdown between like the staff and administration, and like this is prior to like my principal getting here. And like she and I talk about this often, but it's like, in the same kind of idea, like they asked her like, hey, how long is it going to take you to shift this? And then her whole thing was like, kind of taking into consideration like these strategies, like, I'm never going to be able to really get past, something like building or bartering, because there's so much deep rooted pain and anguish from like the previous superintendent. And like these individuals are now, like 60% of our teaching, like of teachers across the entire district are going to be retiring. And like she's retiring as well. So she's like, I'm never going to be able to get past that hump, right? The best I could do is steer this ship as much as I can from the rocks. But it's like one of those things where you're just going to have to be able to like cycle through an entire set of individuals, right? And being kind of realistic that we're going to have to just kind of work within like maybe like the first two or three like levels, but that bond is just not going to happen. And for that same kind of mentality, and like she kind of inherited this, and she knew going into this, and kind of she just kept that mentality. And like even till this day, a lot of it is a lot of bartering, right?
Yeah.
A lot of bartering between herself, the administration, and like the teacher corps, right? And then you can kind of tell how that affects even like the way that like teachers and students interact, the way that department to department kind of interacts with each other as well. But that was just kind of, go ahead, please.
Yeah, it's a process. It's a slow process. Yeah. And one of the things you mentioned there, though, is it can also be a glimmer of hope, though, is that you're talking about a lot of retirements happening.
Yeah.
So there's an opportunity now there for, very thoughtful hiring and very thoughtfully building the type of team you want in your building. And I think that's so critical. Because when you're thinking about, making it shift and really, really shifting the culture, then you want to really be careful and you want to be very, very thoughtful about who you bring on that team and then how you support them and how you nurture them and get them to stay, because that's where you gradually kind of turn the tide. Yeah.
Yeah. And may I add something to that piece?
Sure. Mm.
And the way that like the board and like they kind of decided to do that, they ended up hiring a new superintendent with more of a human resource kind of lens to kind of navigate that piece. So they're like thinking 5 years in the future once all of these individuals retire and thinking about who they wanted to kind of steer that entire team
Absolutely.
to get to that point and being intentional about how the hiring process comes into play.
And that's why when you look at the statistics, it's not going to happen unless you've got leaders that stay for at least 10 years, right? To really get that to move. And so that, the idea that there's a revolving door with leadership in a lot of districts and a lot of schools, that's what's crushing things. I can see it, and I mean, full transparency, I've been at North Central. I'm just starting my 7th year. We've had 4 presidents since I've been there. That's a lot. But the last 2 years, we've got the leader who's taking the helm, and it was someone who came up from within. He was our provost. He moved up to be our president, doing a great job because he knows the territory. He loves the culture. He loves the community. But just look, when you look at something as big as a college and you've got 4 presidents in 6 years, that's a lot, and that you can't accomplish much, right? As a leader, you're just kind of treading water till what's the next step kind of thing. And people were upset at first when President GP was put into the leadership role because it was a movement from within. It wasn't a national search, those kinds of things. But what really sold it was we'd had too much change. We'd had too much change in a very short period of time. And so we needed someone that was just going to steer the ship, thank goodness, because it's important. It's really important. But when you see that, when I was working with the inner city Catholic schools under a Big Shoulders grant, when I was at St. Xavier University, that was the most frustrating thing for my colleagues and I, was that we would go in and we would get grant money and we would bring in professional development. We would bring in assessments. We would bring in coaches. And then, we'd be working with the school for 4 years. And maybe we'd see, 30 for 40% of the teachers out the door before by the time we got to the next cycle. So you'd be getting so far with the professional development and the coaching, and then they were gone, and then you're starting over again with fresh people. And we were seeing the same thing with the principals. I think we worked with about 7 or 8 schools at that time, and the one school that we saw, common sense, that we saw the greatest growth in, the principal and the assistant principal stayed with us for the entire 7 years. They were in that building for the long haul. And the teachers, there was a culture of trust there, and they were willing to move along and change and accept the professional development, accept the movement into like that community. But it was so frustrating. It was actually one of the reasons that really prompted me to leave St. Xavier and come to North Central, because I wanted to work with training school leaders, because I thought that's where it's all at. These are the people that are going to make a difference. These are the people that have to be the heart of the school. And they have to be in it for the long haul. Yeah. Sorry, I got off on that tangent. Okay. Okay. Lindsay.
What you said about the revolving door, that's been happening with the related service supervisor in my district. And I mean, it's been like a new person every year for like the past 5 years. And what is interesting, because I've been watching from the outside, it doesn't directly impact me, but they spend the whole year trying to learn how to do the managerial part of the job, because no one knows how to do the job anymore because everyone leaves after a year. So there's like no one to train them. There's no guidance. There's no So they don't even have the opportunity to build those relationships and build the
Mm.
connection to staff because they're so busy just trying to figure out what they're supposed to do because no one can guide them in that area. And it causes the next person to say, I don't want to do this job. And then
Yeah,
it's a vicious cycle.
yeah, it's frightening. And who's going to suffer the most? The children, the students. Yeah, yeah. Oh, let's not get depressed though. We want to get excited about things. So let's move on just a little bit more. Okay, so I'm going to move a little bit quicker because it's getting a little later. So just this is the last piece. I'm going to stop after this piece, but I'm going to just share this with you. This is kind of fascinating because they talk a lot about um, different archetypes, and I never thought about leaders as archetypes, but it's really important. So there's a woman by the name of Patricia Pitcher, and she did huge research. And it was something that you could be, that can absolutely be applied to schools because what she did is she took 8 years and she studied these people in 15 different executive roles, kind of in global financial corporations. And she was interested in kind of the link between their leadership, personality types, and the effectiveness in the organization. And so her study, and when she kind of filtered through all the data and really sat down and analyzed and looked for the themes, she came up with like three basic archetypes of leaders. So she talks about leaders who are artists. They're brilliant visionaries, people-oriented, open-minded, intuitive, absolutely artists. Then she talks about the next group that she found that were craftsmen. These are people who are really much more empathetic and effective developers of people. They really empowered others, and they're really skilled at bringing out the best in others. And then she found a whole category of leaders that we call technocrats. So often very brilliant, but they're kind of prone to like being very hyper rational rather than letting any emotions into the decision. And they may be very meticulous at managing things, but they have a real hard time managing people. So when you think about it, artists, craftsmen, and technocrats, if they're matched to the right roles in an organization, they could bring great strengths. But if they're mismatched, they're you're going to see a disaster, right? It's just a recipe for disaster. So we hear about, leaders who might be successful in one school and unsuccessful in another. You may have heard about that. Somebody who was really brilliant, did a great job with the school, so then they move them to another school and they flounder. So when you think about it, some leaders may not do well in like say a school district that's very privileged students, high involvement with parents. They might not have the patience or the disposition to really work with these, it's kind of a public relations role, but they could be transferred and maybe you place them in a struggling school in a lower community and it brings out the best in them and they can really turn that school around. So when you think about the artists, they're visionary leaders. They're very, very, very valuable and they're very important. But generally, on their own, they can't hold things together. And once they leave, there's a vacuum, right? So if the artists don't surround themselves with other people, craftsmen and technocrats, then anything they've been able to change just falls to the wayside because they can't do that. Now, the craftsmen are the people that can take a vision that an artist has come up with and they can turn it into a reality. They can make them understandable, they can make them useful, they can bring together the human resources to make the schools work. And when you think about the craftsmen, they really have to have a lot of those management things that we talked about in that list of 13. So while the artist probably sketches out the vision, it's the craftsmen are the ones that really have the competencies to get the job done. And they're able to sustain these things over the long haul. Now, they talk about the fact that in some schools we might have way too much vision and not enough who can do the craftsman work of building the strategies, develop the programs, and marshal the human resources to get the jobs done. And Pritchard in her research said we could probably do with fewer technocrats, even though they have an important role, but it's limited because they tend to sit on a mountains of rules, regulations, and they want to use a kind of management that's very scripted and very impersonal. So one of the things that she was worried about is that she saw so many technocrats in top leadership roles. And she talked about how they could be very useful at a different level in an organization, but they could do significant harm as a principal or as a superintendent. So remember, your artists, they really look at leadership as a vision, and then they transfer that into goals. And so as visionaries and artists, they tend to be emotional and imaginative and entrepreneur-like. The craftsmen are the ones that take that design and transfer those ideas into things. And craftsmen tend to be stable and wise and responsible and rather detail-oriented. So when you think about it, it's not a matter of whether or not you need all of these people in a school district, but what it is you need them in the right places. You need the people in the right seats on the bus, because it's important to have that initial spark from someone who's an artist and the craftsman who can do it, and even need the technocrats who can actually design the things that need to be, the rules and regulations and things that keep things moving. But if you've got too many artists and too many technocrats, they can actually impede the progress. So what's interesting is when you're thinking about it, the craftsmen tend to be the people, even though they're not very flashy, they're kind of the ones that get things working. I'm going to stop there, but I want to have your reaction to artists and craftsmen and technocrats. Examples in your life, what are your thoughts about it? Which one do you think you are? They're all good. Don't all jump in at once.
I was just wondering, like your perspective, Dr. Spellman, on like what roles you think fall under artists, because I feel like I see myself as very creative, but then I also see myself as very empowering when you mentioned that word with the craftsman. And so I feel like I identify with
Honestly, I
those.
think we all have I think we need to be a balance of a little bit of all of these things, because I think there's times when we need to be visionary. We need to be, that person who's charismatic and leading the charge. Um, and it's like the other things that we've talked about. I think there's a little bit of all of that in us, particularly the craftsman and the artist. But it depends on the situation, and it depends on what is your default mode, right? I think that my point would be more, one thing to think about yourself. Where do you belong in that group? Where do you lean heavily most? But I want you to think even more importantly, when you're in the leadership position, how do you want to build your team? You don't want a whole team of visionaries. You don't want a whole team of technocrats, and you don't want a whole team of craftsmen. You want a balance in there somewhere. And then you want to think about where's the right place. I think her research was, I would say that I thought her research was pretty on target, that if you got technocrats at the top, it's not great, because they're just, rules and responsibilities and roles and, black and white, and here we go. And I don't think you want just an artist there without at least a craftsman and a technocrat to balance that. So what do you see in your leaders?
I was going to say for myself, I think I'm definitely an artist. I want to be more of a craftsman, but I do notice when I'm in a room full of artists, I become a craftsman because I also like love the idea generation, but I do feel like we should go somewhere with it. So sometimes I take that role, like, all right, let me take notes on this. Let's see what we can, like that kind of thing.
Cool. That's cool. I don't think people are clearly just one or the other. I think, but you want to look at when you're getting into roles, where do you generally, where's your default mode? But if you're able to shift, that's powerful. I find myself being much more of a craftsman. Um, I want to get the job done. I want to organize the curriculum. I want to design the lessons. I want to, create the syllabi, those kinds of things. But, I'm also in a different role right now where I'm being very artistic, where Dr. King and I are working together to develop a whole new doctoral program for ethical leadership for the college. And it's a big 2-year process. And absolutely, now we're taking turns being the visionary artist and the craftsman. And at times we have to dig into, getting some technocrats on our team to figure out what do we have to do to get through this level at the state and this level at the Higher Learning Commission, and how do we make sure that we balance it. So I think, yes, we can shift. I think we can shift depending on the context and the job. But it's kind of good to know that there are those different archetypes, though.
Dr. Spellman, would you say that going back to our I think ways of knowing when we were talking about instrumental, would you say like your technocrats tend to be more instrumental or no?
Oh, that's a good thing. I haven't thought about that. I'll bet they would be. I bet they would be heavily, show those characteristics. Yeah, I bet they would. You could also get that though in the you could also get that in the self-authoring people as well. There could be a strain there. Yeah. I don't think any of us are purely one or the other, but it's just me.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
good questions though. You're thinking and you're still awake. That's good. I have to keep
Been a
checking
long
the
weekend.
I have to keep checking the two clocks here to make sure what time it is. Okay. All right. Well, you've been listening to me babble for quite a while, so I'm going to I I believe I've let me double check before I lie to you. Let's see. Okay. I have just opened the ethical dilemma. So it's 7:19. Why don't we take a break? Take about 10 minutes for yourself, come back. I'm going to put you in your groups so that you can go right into your ethical dilemma. And I will see you in your groups in about 10 minutes. You're not in, Lori? Hold on. I'll get you.
It's okay. Thank you.
Are you okay, dear? You're
I'm good.
okay.
Yeah,
Good.
I'm good. It was like a last minute appointment, but I'm glad I didn't get to miss too much of everything. So
Okay. All right. You've been a trooper.
If I can think of it in my head.
oh, here we go. I found it. Let me see. Um,
Okay.
responsibility, fulfilling one's duty and accepting the consequences
Yeah.
of one's words and actions.
Yeah, that would be, yeah.
Honesty could also be some.
Yeah, it seemed the first boy showed responsibility because he seemed genuinely remorseful, and then the
Yeah.
second boy didn't.
Generosity, hopefulness, humanity. Let's see what else. Okay, well, for time purposes, we can always add later if we have extra time. What are the different virtues in conflict?
Yeah, justice and I guess either forgiveness or mercy. Is mercy? Yeah, mercy. I'd say justice and mercy.
Mercy. I'll put mercy in here. Let's see if I can spell today. Yeah.
Here's one.
And then I think also I feel like responsibility and justice could also be.
That's what I was Yeah, I was thinking them too.
Could also
to
be
be
in
accountable.
conflict. Should be prioritized. That's a hard question. Which should be prioritized? Because this is such. I think this is one of the. So again, they keep getting harder.
Yeah.
You're really making us think on a Tuesday night, Dr. Spellman.
On the Tuesday before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got to keep you awake.
It's tough because they both were basically doing the same thing. So you would think that what you
Right.
have to do
Yeah.
to one should be what you have to do for the
Right.
other. But yet at the same time, it seems like the attitude of one
Was
is
the same as
different.
the other.
Yeah.
But they're still like
However,
I think of it as like if they're a bystander in it though. They didn't stop it in any way or warn anyone.
And then you think about the trauma that they've gone through and like how it could be
Right.
different, which could be with like the responses, like the reactions to it, I guess.
but at some point we have to say consequences. There are still
Exactly.
consequences so that
Right.
when people look at a situation, they say, oh, well, I can do something. And then if I'm remorseful later, they'll let me off on it.
Exactly.
And
And
so
then
you kind
that
of have to
brings,
set, yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
I don't know. It's not that would want to use it as a precedent, but I would be careful not to be too lenient just because we are more prone to show grace and mercy because that's what we want to do, because that's what our hearts want to do.
Right.
We want to offer that other choice chance. But what does that say then for our justice?
Exactly.
And what about the elderly woman who was fearful, but what if something else had happened? Or what if the next elderly woman is not just fearful, but she is hurt more than just being fearful because somebody thought, well, I could do something wrong and then be remorseful later and I'll get off scot free. It's a tough situation.
And that's what makes me think back to like the other dilemmas too, because it's like, and like the situations and the decisions, because it's like, well, then you don't want it to happen again, and then just, I don't know. It's so hard because, like what you're saying, we want to give grace, but we also want to provide that consequence, which is kind of like the same with like the other dilemmas, which makes it so hard to figure out, because it's like, well,
Right. And
they happen
yes,
again, but we want them to
right.
know the consequence and we want to give them, grace and understanding. It's so
Right.
hard.
But think about the elderly woman. No,
Yeah.
just imagine that's your mom.
Yeah.
Doesn't that switch things
Right.
around a little bit? Because now you do want a little bit of justice more so than just showing grace and mercy to the person who
Exactly.
stood
Yeah.
out there.
Straight up does not respect women in general. And so it's becoming an issue. So I'm just like, is there an alternative place that they could send him? Is there like some sort of therapy that he could be placed in? Like we have Kenneth Young at our school that um gets used by a lot as well. So I mean like there's so many questions.
Yeah. What's our next question on them? Okay.
What virtues are relevant to the dilemma? Well, we kind of brought up equity.
Yeah, I think equity definitely is.
Like fairness. Um, these two students are not being treated equally.
Yeah.
So would
Not
that
that,
go into justice too?
yeah, I would say justice. And not
Yeah.
that equal treatment is the right answer, but like we talked about the trauma, you have to be trauma informed with your decision making,
Right.
which
But
might make it a different outcome for the Kevin.
yeah, but also fair that what we do for one, we have to make sure that we're not putting our too much emotions inside and um unbiased.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think that unbiased it's huge because the decision's going to be influenced by the remorse that the one student showed and the lack of that the other student showed. But should that really be a determining factor?
hard. Okay. Where are we at in our framework?
We're are different virtues in conflict? If so, which should be prioritized in the situation?
I think that like moral virtue. Mm, Um,
I think equity, is
Well,
kind
my
of at
virtues
odds with
list, yeah.
fairness.
Mhm.
So,
Like I think that like fairness and um integrity, I don't know. Because
I
it's
I was even gonna say like in a way like one of the virtues on the 80 virtues for life, detachment. I wonder if like we almost need to be detached from it.
mm.
I mean like that kind of goes into the unbiased part of it, but like I don't know. This one's tripping me up.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Like,
Hmm.
yeah. Like you
Yeah.
alternative school, and then like you are on a schedule where you are working your way back to like the gen ed high school with
Yeah,
supports.
to your homeschool. Yeah.
Your high school.
The SPED testing should be in there too.
Oh, of
Mhm.
course, yeah, yeah. So like I think
School
um
being
I think for option B, C, and D, they're all gonna have to include sped testing.
Mhm.
Are you
And
all the
also
way?
providing him with like related services as well, like
We made it through
counseling.
really quickly, Dr. Spellman, this time.
I'm sorry.
We made it through this one really quickly.
I was going to say you're barreling through compared to the other groups here.
Integration. Okay, so for D, I wrote SPED testing, alternative location or alternative schooling with a behavior plan for reintegration with the regular school that he was at.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I'm assuming like he's living in a shelter. If he has like the CFS worker, sometimes they have access to shelters. So
Well, they're probably on their McKinney Vento, so they're being provided with some sort of services.
Yeah.
yeah,
But didn't they say that they were living with a friend?
the
Yeah,
mom
there's
was
like the
right. The mom, but I didn't think that the child was.
probably.
It says has lost her permanent city and was now staying in the room of a friend in another city. Oh, okay. So, I mean, I'm afraid his dad is not around, so he won't listen. So, is the child even living with the parent? Are they, and where are they living in?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think regardless, option D makes the most sense because I feel like remote learning would not be the most conducive environment, regardless where they're at.
Okay, I also have to bring up I had two answers for the what decision would the community expect. I feel like it depends who you define as community. Because
Mhm.
if you're talking about like people who come from like similar backgrounds, they're not gonna want expulsion. But I feel like that's the only thing that I was thinking of.
So then people with similar situations or
Like
hardships
similar
will,
hardships, like people that could identify with the story would
yeah.
want a different resolution, but people who couldn't, or maybe
Mhm.
for whatever reasons didn't, they would expect expulsion.
So what would be the other
Option
yeah.
that I think that they would be preferring. I would say like any of the other ones that don't involve expulsion. I'd
And
say
we're talking about the community, right?
yeah, the community, I think allowing the student the opportunity to graduate. Because a lot of these like students that come from African American backgrounds, like graduating high school is a huge step.
Do we know if they're black? It didn't
Oh, they
provide,
didn't?
no, it didn't provide race or ethnicity.
Oh, it didn't? Okay, so never mind.
But to your point though, just in general, right? Like then that's like that idea of like, does the community rally around this individual and like support them, right? I know of many individuals who like They don't live with their parents. They live with like a friend, or are they in like some sort of like foster situation? Heck, I've known educators who have taken some of these individuals in themselves.
Yeah.
But we can just, yeah, we can put that. Just put that.
Remember, their family is also part of the community.
Yeah.
Right.
So
So
I
can
guess,
we include like a little note that says like, but their family would like them, even, their probably family would expect it, especially Douglas's family,
yeah.
that he might be shown mercy.
Yeah, especially like if, the family has certain relationships within the community too. What is
So I
that?
want to say Douglas because it doesn't sound like Kevin's mom wants any mercy shown
Hmm.
just because the way she talks about him, like
Yeah.
right up
Or
front with,
not that she
not
doesn't
even
want
in closed
mercy
doors.
shown, yeah,
Yeah.
but
She's
that she doesn't
afraid.
expect it to be shown either.
Yeah.
Oh, I missed the part where it says his dad is not around, so he won't listen to me. I missed that part.
Which you can't go based off that because, well, we don't know about Douglas, I guess.
Uh,
Or what is their decision based on what is best for the student?
So
Well,
are we talking students at the school, or are we talking students, Douglas and Kevin?
I
maybe
think it could be
both.
both or either
Both, yeah.
or. I think
I have an idea. What do you guys think?
I think for if I'm talking specifically about the boys, being out of school is not going to be their best interest long term.
Sorry, what did you say? My headphones keep going in and
Oh,
out.
she was just asking what we think.
Okay, sorry.
Um, Only because like I just have a feeling I'm sure this has happened and it unfortunately has happened in other districts and not nationwide. But these, students who come from some students that come from hard backgrounds, they get all this punishment and then they get pushed into the wrong system.
Yeah, the prison to pipeline or
Yeah.
what is it? Prison pipeline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's
not
what I
just
worry
that, like
about.
just find wrong groups, like, gangs and like people that are like, hey, well, that they see now are accepting them as family, but they aren't the right type of family. So I
Yeah.
feel like having for the boys, having that suspension, but also having some sort of, I don't know, like there has to be some sort of consequence for the actions taken. But I don't think completely expelled from school is the right course of action.
Yeah.
So some sort of a consequence with redemption. See, I'll
Yeah.
tell you where my gut goes. My gut goes to they need to be expelled. And and then I'll probably think about it all week and
Oh,
then
we
I'll say,
good.
but here's the thing. It's only at some point they have to have a consequence that hurts to keep them from making more terrible choices in the future. So like thankfully not right now, no one was seriously hurt. Um, but if they think, oh, I can get off and it's okay, and have gotten forgiveness, then they just keep going down this line where they step more and more and more. That's where I go. Yeah, in order to prevent something worse from happening in the future, why not take serious consequences now so that they can look back and go, wow, I didn't want to have that happen again.
See,
And
I just think for Kevin, I don't think that will fly for him.
Yeah.
no,
Because
Right.
he already has this I don't have to listen to anyone attitude and I don't care attitude.
yeah. I I feel like whether it's a Like, I think if it's a suspension, it should be like an in-school suspension because
Yeah.
if they're at home, then they can get into more trouble. Or like if they get expelled, well, like kind of like what Colleen you were saying, um, Kevin, even Douglas, they just might like, okay, I don't have school. Nobody, they might have those thoughts of like, well, they didn't care about me. My dad's not around, so like, what else am I gonna do? I'm just gonna get into more trouble because at least if I go to jail,
Yeah.
I'm there and I have,
Right.
Yeah,
I have a place to go type of thing.
that's
And so
true.
it just makes me think about that like school to prison pipeline of like if they're like expelled, then they're just like, well, the school gave up on me. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
does the mom have resources to enroll them in another school? And so that's where I feel like some type of in-school suspension with like a specific process of like having that type of consequence because you could still have that consequence in school. And it's going to take time, especially probably the trauma that um, Kevin, I think, yeah, Kevin's
Hmm.
been in. So it just like that's, I guess, where my thought is going. Because I
So there has to be some sort of um what's the word? Rehabilitative aspect to it, right?
Yeah, we have like a whole, it's like 6-step process.
Okay. And does it say anything about like, I'm sure it wouldn't be like if a child's arrested outside of school.
There was something, but I probably have to
Really?
open the whole like document. Let me see.
Okay, so it just says, yes, it can happen, but whether high school can punish a student for being arrested off campus depends on a lot of circumstances. Um, if an off-campus conduct was a serious crime, the school may have the legal authority to suspend or expel the student. If it affects the safety and welfare of the learning environment of the school, a school may argue that discipline, suspension, or alternative school is warranted. Um, okay. So so yes, the school is within its,
Legal rights.
yeah, legal rights.
Yeah, because
Okay.
ours says police involvement and or arrest for criminal actions or other interventions and or consequences deemed appropriate by school administration.
Okay. So what would
That
the
seems very vague and
Yeah.
a little scary because
And then it
like in
goes
this
things.
situation, if you have some bias towards one kid and not the other, your outcomes are drastically different. It's a little scary that that can determine your life path
right? Because
is
if
by
kids
the
aren't in
principal being
school,
like, you're a bad egg, you're probably going to get charged.
yeah.
So we might as well kick you out of school.
Okay. So what would the profession expect?
I put down to follow what the handbook and law says to do in this type of situation.
Okay.
I also think that we haven't addressed like the sped thing either, though. Like getting requested to get sped tested. So I think that that would also be part of that decision. So would our, would the profession expectation be to test him for it? But how are we going to test him if he's suspended from school?
Well, I mean, I do think it's like if there hasn't, maybe like the school needs to conduct a record review to determine if like he has struggled with academics in the past or struggled with um self-regulation or any sort of like social emotional, like look up his behavior um records. So I feel like a record review needs to be conducted before they can just open up a case study. Because just if someone says like sped, that doesn't mean like they're going to do a full case study.
Yeah. And part of the domain, the consent for reevaluation, is that. So the domain meeting is when you are basically doing a record review and you're looking at what information do we have in each domain? Um, what information do we have? Is that enough information or do we need more? And then how do we gather more information? So a lot of times schools are like hesitant to even open a domain. Opening a domain doesn't mean that you have to evaluate that area. It's just evaluating what information you have in that area. And if you determine, oh, we have enough information academically, we have all his MAP scores and da 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 da, it doesn't mean you have to evaluate. But I think that a domain meeting would be a good place to start because you
Yeah.
could systematically go through each domain and do a record review and see what information is available.
And then 3 internships.
Got it.
Yeah, that's something we're done. So
You're done. You're the only group done, so you can relax and chat and share information. The others are on finishing up stage 3, so it'll probably be about another 5 minutes. So you can take a nap, take a walk,
a question for you.
relax.
We were just wanting to make sure, like, so the class will be on same time Tuesdays, same date.
Next class.
Okay.
It's pretty much we try to keep it for the whole 2 years. The only time you'll meet at another time is when you have a class and your internship going on. And then the internship seminars, we kind of try to dedicate, you know, your internship seminar will be a small group. It'll be maybe, a supervisor and 4 people. So a lot of times they'll come to consensus on a different night for that because you don't want to conflict with the night that you have class. We try to, when we put it in the catalog, we designate Thursday nights for internships just because we only offer the other classes on Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. So if you start your cohort in the summer, your classes will be Mondays for 2 years. If you start like you did in the fall, it's going to be Tuesdays for 2 years. If you start in spring, it'll be Wednesdays for 2 years. And then we kind of keep Thursdays open for seminar meetings, but we allow the flexibility. You'd still have to register for it as a Thursday evening, once a month meeting, but usually the supervisors set them up. If the whole group gets together and says Monday's better night for us, then they meet on Monday night or whatever. And next week, I'll make the announcement to the whole group, but next week, Dr. King is going to be our guest speaker, and she's going to go over the internship, give you a whole overview of it, and spend a little bit of time with you because then you move to her class in January.
I was about to ask about the internship. So okay.
And is the
Yeah.
intern billed separately?
It's just billed as credit hours. It's, during the fall, it's 3 credit hours. During the spring, it's 3 credit hours. And in the summer, it's 2 credit hours.
Okay.
So once you get through, so you've got 1 class this semester, you paid for 4 credits. In spring, you'll have 1 class the first 8 weeks and the second 8 weeks, so that's 8 credits. Then in the summer, you'll have 1 class with the internship, so that'll be 6 credits.
Okay.
So, so kind of your next semester is your technically most expensive semester, right? Because you've got 2 4-credit classes. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And that's the 3,900.
Oh, I don't know the numbers at all.
That's okay. I was just
Yeah, Camila, I was like, we got the financial aid packages for like fall and spring, but then we have classes in the summer.
You'd have to talk to Jenny Jeschke or the bursar's office. I don't deal with the money at all. They don't trust me with the money.
So I know this will maybe more for Dr. King, but like, what would like an internship look like in the summer when?
So the summer is really not, you'll have a class, right? So you'll
Yeah.
have 1 class, and the classes in the summer run. We usually start the week of Memorial Day weekend, and it runs for 8 weeks. So all your classes are 8 weeks.
Mhm.
And then the internship in the summer is fairly flexible because we call that really kind of your residency. So it's got a lot of flexibility because you're supposed to actually kind of apprentice or shadow an administrator, and you set it up between your schedule and theirs as long as you get it in sometime in that summer 8 weeks. And it's usually, 80 hours is what the kind of the ballpark. I mean, it's not like but it's like a ballpark. So it's basically like 2 weeks, but you can do, 4 weeks half days. You can do, 2 weeks, the whole thing. You can split it up and do things right away in May to see how things close down at the end of the year, or you could do some things at the in the late August to see how schools open up. But it's basically where you're kind of shadowing and doing a lot of things. Sometimes that's when people are get involved with interviewing and that kind of thing. So your internship supervisor, like you'll be in a smaller group and they will really guide you through all of that. Yeah. And sometimes the groups are mixed. You might have 3 interns that are just starting and a couple of interns that are leaving. So that's kind of nice too, because you'd be in the same seminar group and you can exchange ideas.
Nice.
Yeah. It's good. I mean, it's a good. We take care of you.
And I guess my question, and I can ask this to the whole group, but the internship doesn't have to be with like our principal that we built that when we applied. It could be like a different administrator.
I think usually the person when you applied that signed the paper is kind of the person of record.
Okay.
But basically, like, say, if I'm your principal and but one of my assistants handles all the budget. So when it gets to the time that you're doing budget things, you'll go work with that person. And maybe there's someone else that's in HR that deals with the interviews. So sort of like your principal can subcontract you out to whoever's got those, got the expertise that can give you the experience there. So you could be doing things with a dean, with an AP, with somebody from central office, that kind of thing. Yeah. But the state of Illinois requires that the person of record who is listed as your mentor has to be someone that's a principal with at least 2 years of experience and proficient ratings and that kind.
That makes sense. The reason I asked is because like I do like extended school year. So I was hoping to do with like the director of SPED who kind of runs our extended school year.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that'd be perfect in the summertime. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We work around everybody's situation is different. So we work to make it work with you and your situation.
Okay. Cool.
I mean, we've even had people go to different schools, if there was like a bad relationship between a principal and a student, then we can put you do your internship with a principal at another school. But that's an extreme case. All right, I better see how the other darlings are going. Time is clicking here.
Time.
Yeah, some of you are just having way too much fun. Okay, so we had, let's see, in my list. So we had Angelica, Raphael, Edwin, and Camila. How about telling us your option A, option B, and option C? And since you were the speedy group.
Sure. I can share. Option A, we said just expulsion. Option B, we said some type of remote learning from wherever he's staying. Option C, we said an alternative school with counseling service. And then option D is get the SPED testing, alternative location, so like an alternative school with a behavior plan for reintegration to the original school with counseling services. And that is the one that we went with.
Okay, very thorough. All right. So then we had Carrie, Colleen, and Lori.
Yeah, so our option A was an in-school suspension with community service, regular meetings with social workers, and provide a male mentor. Option B was expel both students, and option C was transfer to another school.
And you went with?
We went with option A.
Okay, all right. And then Megan, Lauren, Kristen, and Lindsay.
So we got cut off right at the end, but where we were going, so similarly, option A, both expelled, option B, Kevin expelled, Douglas suspended. Option C, we were saying both boys, some sort of suspension maybe with a plan to reintegrate back to school. That included like supports, social work, regular check-ins, things like that.
Okay. All right. What about leadership styles here? If you got that far, some of you got that far, right?
Well, we wrote moral, we wrote moral, spiritual, and ethical. We saw bits that you would need from all of those it seems like you could pull strengths from all of those to be used.
Okay.
I don't know. Is that always the case?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. You can draw upon different aspects of those types of leadership. Yeah. Yeah. Anything about the virtues? What leadership virtues would you need to guide you through this?
We listed some that we didn't list in the beginning. So we said like patience, honesty, prudence, creativity, critical thinking.
Good. Good. So what was your overall reaction? Now you've been doing these for several weeks in a row. Any thoughts about this whole exercise that I put you through? Lindsay?
We were struggling because I think that we didn't feel like this was a school um, issue. Like we were literally Googling, can a school suspend a kid for something they've done outside of school? So we were really struggling with the concept that a kid could be expelled for something they did that had nothing to do with school.
Okay. Anybody have any experience with that? You're nodding, Edwin. What can you offer?
Yeah, so like I've run a couple of SEO programs, and this is a lot of what like comes down with like students. They like so I've had students who like have committed things like shooting, right? Like they did like a drive-by kind of situation, right? Like they weren't the one that pulled the trigger, but they were part of the whole situation, those kinds of things, right? Um, yeah, it's always like a lot of like muddy water just because of the fact that like although they didn't commit the crime outside, um, the school still kind of played it more in the sense of like, but we still have to think about the safety of the individuals within our own school system, right? There's that situation. Another situation is, and a female student, a male student, they're dating. This entire thing goes down. There's a lot of domestic violence. One gets sent out, one gets, sent to a different place, but they both came back to their home school, right? So it was one of those situations where like the victim and I guess like the perpetrator, because it was done outside of the schooling situation, we're still having to come back into the same school environment, right? So like even though like morally it's probably not the best kind of situation to be in, I it's like 2 weeks ago, right? But legally, like this is the student still home school. They ended up kind of taking like given the option, because we, at least in our school district, have like our own like alternative program for more like internalizers, and they kind of just provided the option to the young lady and just said like, hey, you can stay in the school in the same situation, or we'll let you kind of be in one of the other schools, so you don't have to be within the same situation, and then provide things like transportation, etc.
Yeah, it gets like you said, I think muddy is it's a good explanation. And I think a lot of it depends on the area. I think it depends on the district, it depends on the board. There's so many factors that come in there. Yeah. That's why it's a dilemma. Right. So, okay. Couple of housekeeping things. I did mention to one of the groups, but just for everyone to know. So next week when we meet, Dr. King is going to join us, Dr. Kathleen King, and she's going to spend, a good half hour, 45 minutes with you and go give you a kind of a big overview introduction to what the internship is going to be like. Now that you're at the end of the first course and you're already starting to think about what's summer going to be like, what's next fall going to be like. We know you've got 2 classes next semester, 535 in January, and then you've got 536 in March. But she's going to give you kind of a big, broad overview of that. She's also, you've met her if you were at the meet and greet. She's the chair of our department, but she, up until this year, she was also the director for all of the internships. Because she became chair of our department, she's stepping back from that a little bit, but she's still doing this kind of orientation for you. So she'll be there next week with us. Couple of different reminders. Remember, your showcase portfolio is due Sunday evening, and make sure that you've got your home. You're looking at that checklist that I give you every time I send an assignment back. Make sure you've got a nice home page. Make sure you've got things reflections in each area, those kinds of things. I am behind on grading, so as you could tell, you didn't get anything back today. Just this weekend, your projects came in, and the final projects for the capstone people came in. I honestly am prioritizing getting theirs done because they graduate next week, so I have to get those done and get them in right away. But I promise they'll be all done in time for you to put them up into your portfolio. So that's due Sunday, and then after we meet for next Tuesday night, at the end of the evening, then I will open up the post assessments. Remember, you took like that DIT that you took with the scenarios. You did that before we started. You did the essays before we started. So all those will open up. And remember then that next week, though, you don't the week 8 you only have until Friday because that's the end of the semester, and then I have to have grades in on Monday morning. So week 8 is opened up for you as much as possible for you to go ahead. What we're going to do next week will be basically we'll play it by ear in terms of time. Usually Dr. King comes in the first hour. Just depends on her family. But I told her she could have any hour within the time. The other thing that we're going to do next week is just a little variation on the ethical dilemma. So what I'm going to do is, and I'll explain it in more detail next week, but I've worked with some colleagues at another university and we've shared materials. And so they have created ethical dilemma scenarios along with some supporting documents. So things like, school policies and, things like that. It kind of mimics what will happen in one of the content exams where you're given a scenario and you're giving some supporting documents and then you have to kind of talk about it. So we're going to use their ethical dilemma. We're going to look at their supportive documents in your small groups. You're going to fill out the ethical dilemma framework like you do for me every week. But then when we come back, instead of having a conversation about who did what, A, B, and C, we're going to stop, and then I'm going to show you a video of actors actually portraying the entire scenario that you read and dealt with. And then you'll come back and we'll talk about it, and you'll change in your notes. What difference did it make reading it on paper versus now seeing these actors portray it? So from Lipscomb University, I have 3 colleagues there that I'm very close with, and they have a big film department, and they got a huge grant. And so they have developed 10 scenarios with 10 videos using their students and professional actors, and they're very nicely done. And so I gave them my reflection framework. I've worked with them on some research. So they've given those to us as a gift. And so you'll find there's one in every course as you go through the program. And so this will be your first time dealing with that. So it'll be it's different and exciting. And then we'll celebrate, and then we'll be poof, I won't see you again until you're all polished and at the end ready to graduate. Any questions before we say goodnight? I wish you all a wonderful Thanksgiving. Stay safe. Blessings to your families, and I'll see you next Tuesday evening. Okay. And I'll stay on as long as anyone has any questions.
Thank you.
Yeah. So can I confirm? So next week is our last class. That'll be the last one. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Been a fast 8 weeks.
It has. It has. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Happy Thanksgiving.